17 deaths. Not overseas, not decades ago. 17 people found dead outside in New York City during a single, historic, cold stretch. And here's the part that makes this bigger than a weather story. The response is now under formal political investigation. As dangerous wind chills settle back over the city, the New York City Council is preparing oversight hearings into Mayor Zohran Mamdani's handling of the crisis. Specifically, whether government systems designed to protect the most vulnerable actually worked when they were tested hardest. This isn't just about a mayor defending himself. It's about how far government authority should go in emergencies, how responsibility is assigned when policy meets reality, and what happens politically when compassion, coercion, and constitutional limits collide. Within days, lawmakers will publicly question city agencies, homelessness outreach protocols, police involvement, and life or death decisions made during Code Blue alerts. And if you're someone who already watches politics for what it signals rather than what it says, you're exactly where you should be right now. Because what happened on New York streets last week has national implications, whether people realize it yet or not. Let's slow this down. According to city officials, 17 people were found dead outdoors across the 5 boroughs over several days of extreme cold. Autopsies show hypothermia contributed to at least 13 deaths, with others still under medical examiner review. Mayor Mamdani's administration points to one central defense: Code Blue, initiated January 19th. Code Blue is New York City's emergency cold weather protocol. It expands shelter capacity, mobilizes outreach teams, and authorizes emergency measures to get people inside, sometimes even involuntarily, if they're deemed a danger to themselves. On paper, it's aggressive. In press conferences, it sounds comprehensive. All hands on deck, the mayor said. So here's the first uncomfortable question. If all systems were activated, why did the death toll continue to rise? That's not an accusation. That's the core question the City Council is about to ask. On the record, Politico reports that the Public Safety and General Welfare Committees are planning a February 10 hearing, with additional committees, like sanitation, considering joint sessions. Translation: this won't be symbolic. It will be procedural, detailed, and political. Here's what complicates things. Outreach teams and NYPD officers did transport some individuals involuntarily. That authority exists, but it sits right at the edge of civil liberties law. Force too little, and people die. Force too much, and the city risks lawsuits, public backlash, and constitutional scrutiny. And here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. There is no policy that guarantees compliance from people who refuse help. That tension between autonomy and protection is exactly where this crisis lives. Another pattern interrupt. New York has faced cold weather before. What makes this different isn't just the temperature, it's the political timing. Mamdani is still defining his executive identity. Oversight hearings this early shape narratives that last entire terms. Once a mayor is framed as reactive or defensive, that label sticks far longer than any weather event. And notice something else. The hearings are not just about deaths. They're about systems, sanitation, policing, social services, coordination failures. That's institutional scrutiny, not personal outrage. If you're the kind of viewer who notices when power quietly shifts from City Hall to committee rooms, you probably already subscribe to channels that don't just repeat headlines. And this is where the real conversation starts. So weigh in below. Should cities have broader authority to forcibly shelter people during lethal weather? Or does that cross a line the government should never cross? That debate is coming whether anyone wants it or not. Now, another layer. As another cold front approaches, the administration is under pressure to prove lessons were learned in real time. Any additional deaths will immediately be viewed through the lens of these upcoming hearings, which raises an even sharper question. At what point does a weather emergency become a political liability? History shows us this pattern, from heat waves to hurricanes. Disaster response doesn't just test logistics, it tests legitimacy. And legitimacy, once questioned, is hard to restore. And if you're someone who already watches politics for what it signals rather than what it says, you're exactly where you should be right now. Because what happened on New York streets last week has national implications, whether people realize it yet or not. This story is not ultimately about Zohran Mamdani. It's about the future boundaries of urban governance in America. Cities across the country are watching New York closely. If expanded involuntary interventions are normalized during extreme weather, other mayors will follow. If courts later push back, the entire approach to homelessness and emergency authority could shift. That affects elections. It affects budgets. It affects how police, social workers, and public health agencies operate together. Or don't. The timing matters because climate volatility is increasing. Extreme cold, extreme heat, these events are no longer rare. Each one becomes a policy stress test. And here's the quiet truth. Whoever defines the narrative of responsibility defines the next decade of urban policy. If the hearings frame this as an unavoidable tragedy despite maximal effort, Mamdani stabilizes. If they expose gaps, delays, or institutional confusion, the consequences won't stop at City Hall. This is how power shifts. Not in dramatic speeches, but in committee transcripts and oversight reports. If you're following this channel, you're already on that long political journey, tracking how moments like this quietly reshape authority in America. And the next piece of this puzzle? How emergency powers, homelessness policy, and constitutional limits are colliding in cities far beyond New York. That's where this story goes next. As another cold front approaches, the administration is under pressure to prove lessons were learned in real time. Any additional deaths will immediately be viewed through the lens of these upcoming hearings, which raises an even sharper question. At what point does a weather emergency become a political liability? History shows us this pattern, from heat waves to hurricanes. Disaster response doesn't just test logistics, it tests legitimacy. And legitimacy, once questioned, is hard to restore. And if you're someone who already watches politics for what it signals rather than what it says, you're exactly where you should be right now. Because what happened on New York's streets last week has national implications, whether people realize it yet or not.